And then that takes us to hydraulics, which is power from water, and water is a network. And we talk about elemental forces, fire and water, right? Well, you ever look at the ocean and what the ocean does, right? Wave action is incredible energy. But another source of energy is buoyancy, right? You ever try to pick up a 2,000-pound weight and carry it on your back up a hill or just across? Put a 2,000-pound weight on a carriage, put it on the back of a donkey, drag it on skids. Problem, right? In this particular case, can't be solved with fire. We can't easily burn it. On the other hand, if you needed to move 2,000 pounds, you put it on a barge, you put it in the water, and the water pushes back 2,000 pounds, and I can push it with one hand. And this is the mastery of hydraulics is fascinating. I went to MIT. MIT's mascot is a beaver. And we have rings that have the beaver on them, and they talk about, why are you the beavers? And the answer is the beaver is nature's engineer. And the beaver is this, nearsighted, short, waddling creature. It shows up, looks around, sees the water flowing, and what? It can just be, bobcat bait or whatever, bear dinner. Or it can do something about it. And what the beaver does is just pretty unbelievable. The beaver starts chopping down trees. But first the beaver figures out where to chop down the trees. Then the beaver chops down the trees. Then the beaver turns the trees into a dam. Then the beaver, it channels the river into the dam, creates a pond, floods the pond, or it's like it's reading the terrain. Yeah. After it's got the pond, it creates a lodge in the middle of the pond with an entrance underwater, and then it creates its life in that lodge. That pond, water is elemental to life, and that pond creates a vibrant ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, lots of things grow. Yeah. But for the most, and lots of creatures benefit. I mean, the ecological diversity improves, and it's good for all the plant life. It's good for all the wildlife. People lament the loss of the beaver, screws up forests, and the beaver is just doing its thing. And if there's a storm and the dam gets messed up, the beaver swims out in the middle of the thunderstorm or hurricane or whatever it is and fixes the dam. It's a very industrious creature. And you just kind of sit back and you're in awe, and you think, wow, how did a creature figure that out? And then what does that mean to humanity? Of course, it means a lot to humanity. I've been all over the world, and I've been to the desert. I've been to Riyadh. I've been to UAE. I've been to Singapore. I've been to Miami Beach. People think oil is money. They think oil is power. They think, and let me tell you, oil is not, it's not really power. It's not wealth. Water is wealth. Mm. Water is the key to life. If I gave you $10 billion and as much land as you wanted in the desert, you can't create life. The cost for you to create a pond in the desert, the cost for you to actually create a park with oak trees. If I gave you $10 billion, you would, and you lived in the desert, Robert, what would you do with the money? What's the first thing you would do?
Buy Bitcoin and exit the desert.
Spoken like a progressive. What if you, so let's parse that. What if you didn't know about Bitcoin and I gave you the $10 billion and you lived in the desert?
I guess you'd be looking for trading partners with water.
You'd exit the desert, right? So what do? You buy yourself a jet. You buy yourself a villa in the south of France. You buy yourself a yacht that floats in the Med, and then you figure out how to live your life, because the cost to grow a palm tree in the desert is $20,000 a year. You want 100 palm trees, it's $2 million a year to have 100 palm trees. You want 4 acres of grass in the desert? You have 100 million a year for 10 acres of grass. By the way, you still can't have it. Even if you spend $100 million a year to put 10 acres of grass in the desert, the sandstorm comes and it wipes you out. Right. Water is elemental to life. We underestimate how important it is until you start paying to create it. And yeah, you can stay alive in the desert, but you know, a person making $50,000 a year that lives in a city that has parks and rainfall and a temperature, a nice temperature, lives better than a billionaire in the desert.
Right.
It's just that powerful. Yeah. Now coming back to hydraulics, you know, the hydraulics will generate power, right? I can harness running water running down a hill and create a turbine, and I can create a mill with that. That's interesting. Again, back to the hunter-gatherer thing. People, if you dropped me 100,000 years ago, and you said, okay, well, Mike, use your brain, go hunt and gather, I'd be like, screw that. What would I do? I would go find a stream with a little bit of elevation, you know, maybe a mountain stream that had fresh water because you can drink it. And I'd find a big enough one that had fish in it. And then I would find a point where I could divert the stream to create a pond. I mean, if the beaver can do it, I can probably do it. I would do some digging. I would divert the stream. I would create a lock. And at that point in the year when the salmon or the whatever are running, I might just flip that lock and I would actually divert the stream into my pond and create myself, you know, maybe it's 100-foot wide pond. Maybe it's a 20-foot wide pond. Maybe it's a 300-foot wide pond. Maybe I waste a lot of the water. I don't care. There's infinite. And I would let 500 of those little fishies get trapped in my pond. I'm not chasing after them with the stick like in Blue Lagoon. I'm not like, there's no such thing as a fair fight. I'm not fishing with the hook. You know, my idea of fishing is with dynamite. I'm going to blow up everything in the lagoon and I'm going to walk and pick up the fish. But in the absence of dynamite, I'm just going to divert the water. What's the flow rate of water? How many fish swim by you? I want them all. Put them in the pond. Then what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to go pull out one a day, and I'm going to let the other fishies swim around. And if the winter comes and the pond freezes over, that's okay. I'm going to chip a little hole in the pond, and I'm going to walk out every day, and I'm going to reach it and grab my fish. And I'm going to eat my fish, and I'm not chasing after stuff. When you chase after stuff, you twist your ankle, and if you break your ankle, you're dying. Right? And you chase after stuff, and then a wolf pack catches you from behind, or you piss off an angry mastodon. So hydraulic power, it's the water life. It's going to bring you something to drink. It's going to bring you something to eat, right? By the way, maybe if I'm worried about the little creepy crawly creatures or whatever, I'm going to dig a trench around where I live, and they're going to have to cross the water to get to me.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'll use water, a moat.
Right.
You know, if I live on a seashore, I'm going to I'm going to find a natural tidal basin, and in that tidal basin, I'm going to let creatures crawl in. You ever watch? Yeah, I went to Maine once. You ever watch crabbers, right? Or actually lobstermen?
I've seen it on TV some, never in person though.
Okay, well, so if you don't know anything about lobstermen, you think, oh, well, these are guys out hunting lobster with a trap. Okay? When you go watch the lobstermen operating, you realize they're not hunting lobster. They're not catching lobster. They're farming lobster. Okay? big difference. They drop the trap, and they'll create a trap. They'll put some kind of herring or something in the trap to what the lobster wants to eat. They drop it. They put 10 of those cages down. They wait. Lobsters are lazy. Lobsters crawl into the cage. They grab the food. They get stuck in the cage. They pull the trap up. They find a big lobster, they keep that one. They find little lobsters, they throw them back in because they need them to keep growing. Mm-hmm. They're creating agriculture to feed the lobster. The lobster's living in happy lobster hotel its entire life. It's not so bad, Robert. If I said to you, I'm going to give you like free room and board to age 70, and then I'm going to eat you. Well, not so compelling. Not so compelling. But if I said to you, Robert, I'm going to give you free room and board until you're 750 years old, and then your life is going to end. Or you can make it on your own, and you'll suffer a horrific death being eaten up by a barracuda at age 35. You might think it's not so bad living, in your lobster hotel 10 times longer than you would live naturally. It's not like these lobsters would have made it very far. They're liking it. They're domesticated lobsters.
Right. Nature tends to pursue the most energy efficient strategy available to it, right? Whether you're the eagle dragging the baby goat off the cliff, or you're the lobster enjoying the lobster hotel, or you're the man diverting the stream to capture a bunch of salmon, you have a tendency to want to do the least but achieve the most, right? It's kind of the nature of productivity itself.
I'm channeling energy.
Yeah. And not wasting any in the process, channeling it as efficiently and usefully as possible.
The pyramids got built 2,000 years before Cleopatra and Caesar. Had they haul it up there? And some of the most fascinating videos I've seen on YouTube are those YouTube videos that show how they build hydraulic elevators to move a 2-ton or 4-ton stone up by floating it, up a channel to the side of a pyramid. And I totally believe that's how they did it. They actually used hydraulics to construct the pyramids. It makes
I haven't seen that actually. I've always seen them rolling them on the logs. How were the hydraulics constructed?
You have a tube of, let's say you have a tube of water. If I put something in the bottom of the tube that's lighter than water with a float attached to it, I put a rock with a float. Maybe you take animal skins and you blow them up with air. It will float up the tube and pop out the back. All you have to do is have the tube be able to hold the integrity. And so I can't do it for 1,000 feet, but I can do it for 20 feet. It's like the way a lock works in a canal. Okay. Like I'm going into a lock, I close the gate, I flood the lock, it lifts the barge, gotcha. I open the other locks, and I go out. So imagine a series of locks that I use to actually lift 100,000 tons of stone using water.
Wow.
Yeah. That's like very, very interesting. Yeah, I think that's how it was done, in my opinion. But water can be used for farming, for fishing. It can be used for security. It can be used for sanitation. In fact, there's without understanding water and the dynamics of water, there is no cradle of civilization in the Aegean or anywhere. And I'll give you another interesting vignette. I go to Santorini. And Santorini's built up on this caldera, looking down on the Aegean.
Beautiful white city, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful city.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
Okay, well, in the 20th century, you can take the elevator up. So I take the elevator up from the port, and the city is 500 feet above, or some number of feet above. And then on the way back, I see donkey rides, and you can take a donkey up. You can take a donkey up to Santorini from the port, or take a donkey down. I'm like, I was in my fitness craze, and I'm like, well, I'm not riding a donkey down, but I think I'll just walk down. I mean, what's the problem? I think I can walk. I don't need to take the sissy elevator. So I start walking down these steps, and the steps aren't terribly difficult. What do you think I see as I'm walking down the donkey steps?
Donkey do?
How much of it do you think I see?
Probably more than you wanted to.
A river?
Wow.
A river of donkey excrement. Mind you, this is like 3 or 4 tourist donkeys taking down the occasional tourist. A river of donkey excrement. And you can hardly avoid it. You're hopping this way and that way. And then my brain starts working. And I start thinking, what happens if there's 100 times as many donkeys? And what happens if they're walking through a city? And what happens if it doesn't? How do you clear this stuff? It's not like they had hydraulic hoses and they could just clean. By the way, they're not clearing it in the 21st century in Greece. It's a river of donkey crap. I mean, they haven't figured out how to clear it 3,000 years later. So let's go back 3,000 years and let's do the thought experiment. What's it like to live in a city using animal power to move stuff around?
Dirty place to live.
Awful, but also unsanitary. I mean, fly infested, typhus infested, typhoid,
right.
Germ infested. And then when it gets dry and this stuff desiccates and it blows through the air, you're going to be breathing it, smelling it. It's going, it's just going to be awful. So you want to drink it and eat it? Okay. This is not just a matter of creature comfort. You're going to die. You can't actually bring together a bunch of human beings unless you work out the sanitation problem. And it was then and there that it dawned on me very viscerally. There's a reason why all the streets in Mykonos are so narrow that you can't get a horse or a cart through them. They're walking cities. By the way, there's a reason that equus and the equestrian class were the Roman knights. The knights were the equestrian class, and what it meant in ancient Rome was the top 1% or the top 0.1%. The nobles of Rome were the equestrian class. What it meant to be rich and powerful was you had the right to bring a horse into the city. Nobody else could. The problem was not they couldn't afford the horses. The problem is if they allowed anybody to bring a horse into the city, it would be so unsanitary as to render the city uninhabitable. So most ancient cities, if you wanted them to work, you would have to have them human powered. And now you've got this dilemma of how do you move goods around? Tell me, how do I move things around cleanly? I need a clean energy source that is not going to foul my sanitary system, that is not going to actually kill me. And of course, it's a boat, right? Mm-hmm. What do you want? You want 25 cities with ports on an inland sea with at least a season, six to 9 months a year, where you can cross from one point to another point without being dashed and killed on the rocks. So you need a fairly mild sea, but you have to have water, because if you have the same 25 cities on land and you're going to use horse or animal power in order to move goods and services back and forth, it's just so dirty, right? So unsanitary that your civilization is probably not going to get off the ground. And so
the Mediterranean was ideal for this, sounds like.
The Mediterranean is the perfect ocean because you can oftentimes navigate without leaving the side of land. It's hard to get too lost. There's a lot of ports.
Very placid, relatively.
And there's a lot of stops. If you look at all of these empires, the Phoenician Empire, the Roman Empire, the Venetian Empire, the British Empire, if you actually tour all the great ports in the Mediterranean, all the really good ones, the story goes something like this. maybe you go into Bonifacio in Corsica. Well, in 1000 AD, this was a Phoenician port. And then the Greek Empire came along and it was an Athenian port, 500 AD. And then the Carthaginians kicked them out and it was Carthaginian port. And then the Romans kicked them out and it was a Roman port. And then after the Romans fell, the Venetians took this over, this Venetian port. And then eventually it became a British port, you know? Like that's the story of Malta, that's the story of Corfu, that's the story of, you know, of lots of different ports in the Mediterranean. And the reason why is if you want to dominate the Mediterranean, you need to have a port within 1 or 2 days sail that you can hide in whenever the mistrals blow. And if you control that network of ports, when the weather goes bad, you go into the port and your ship doesn't get sunk. And if you don't, and you're like a week away from a port that's friendly and the weather gets bad, you get dashed against the rocks and you just die. You know, and that's the end of it. And so these are all nautical networks, and they're all based upon terrain. And the Mediterranean was a good crucible for the, you know, the beginning of a civilization. And when you put together, you know, the incredible power of hydraulic transportation, and then you consider the consequences of not having it, you realize you can't really develop the economic density. We haven't touched much on agriculture. We could, but the general theme is the same, right? When I drop you and you find a fruit tree, you're not going to go, oh, duh, there's a fruit tree in this clearing. I'm going to walk 18 miles to the place where I can find a different fruit bush. And then I'm going to walk 5 miles back to the place where the fish are. You're going to actually pick up the fruit tree and plant like 100 fruit trees next to your fishing pond.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're not stupid. Like Paleolithic man, there's every reason to believe they were smarter and stronger and tougher than we were. I mean, right there.
So this is a
mess around.
I think it's a great point that all of these inventions were leading towards increasing economic or energetic density, and that's what actually provided the bedrock on which to build a civilization.